Hey, good evening, everybody. How are you? It is good to see you, and it is good to be seen by you. I hope everybody's having an absolutely wonderful Wednesday evening. I, of course, am Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, and welcome to the live stream, everyone. Welcome to the thing that we do 5 nights a week. We bring you tabletop gaming goodness, whether it is deep dives, news, reviews, rants, bants, any of that sort of stuff. We do it here and mostly live, although you do get the occasional interstitial video. And if you want to know when, well, click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications, if you would please, and then you'll have all that up to date in your face, courtesy of YouTube. But this live stream is brought to you by our friends at Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde makes the kind of adventures they'd like to play, whether it's for 5th edition, for Castles and Crusades, or for the OSR. Old School is in play at the table with Hellebarde Games, and you can find them at DriveThruRPG or on their website, hellebardegames.com. And if you do like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you're watching this later, leave a comment down below and let us know what you think. And if you like the video, tell us what you like about it, and we'll do more of that. If you don't like the video, leave it a thumbs down and leave a comment and say, I didn't like this, and we'll do less of that, maybe, depending. If you say, I like less of your clothes, Bill, well, obviously I'm not gonna affect that change for you. But anyway, so it's good to be here. Kyle's going to be joining us in just a minute. He is currently hanging out in the green room. I can see him back there. He's shadow boxing. He's doing some curls, some jumping jacks. He's ready. He's hyped. He's going to be joining us here in just a few minutes. So we will bring him on. One thing I do want to mention, I did not know, like last week or even Monday, that someone would say, hey, may I please be on the show this week? And normally I would say, let's put that out so I got some time to relax. But hello, Lightmane. Good to see you, my friend. But this guest is a longtime friend of the show. It is Matt Finch of Mythmere Games. Matt's going to be hanging out with us tomorrow night. And who am I to deny a friend? A guy who helped The Lost Crypt get published. Well, nobody. That's who I am. And speaking of friends, enough banter from me, because it is time to bring on a guy who isn't just half of the show every Wednesday night and a damn good person, but yeah, he is a close personal friend of mine. Everybody, please put your hands together and then take them apart when you realize I can't hear you applaud for the one and only Thunder from Down Under, Mr. the Viking Hat GM himself, Kyle Schuant. G'day, Kyle.
G'day. Hello, boys and girls. How you doing?
Man, I can't complain. I mean, I could, but who'd listen, right?
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Well, I am as predictable as the first page of The Hobbit. But anyhow,
Warren Gifford keeps nagging about Margaret Weiss as a guest.
Yeah, I had. So here's the thing. Because a lot of you guys had asked, and last night we were blasting through and playing some AD&D last night. So I reached out to Margaret Weiss, and she said that she does not do Zoom and things like that. So thank you, but no thank you. So Margaret Weiss will not be joining us as a guest on the show. She was very polite about it. I did not feel brushbacked. I did not feel like she was like, screw you and your TV funhouse. But if she'd said yes, absolutely, I would have had her on. So that is a shame. But hey, maybe sometime in the future, or I'll see her at a convention or something and can just do something pre-recorded with her. So that is your answer. Sorry.
So anyway. She old school and analog, is she?
She might be. She is, and I'm not, because I said to the audience that I was going to ask Margaret Wise. I mentioned her, but there are a couple of other people of that same era at TSR that I asked, artists, and they respectfully declined. For similar reasons.
I know there's an interesting writer I follow, John Michael Greer, and he's very much kind of analog guy. Like he writes his novels on a computer and stuff, but he doesn't do YouTube. He doesn't even go to the movies. It's really old school in that. But there are interviews with him up on podcasts and stuff. All that happens is he says, "Yes, I will do a phone call and you can record it." So they're just like, if it's presented on YouTube, they just have a little photograph of him and then his voice. So
well, that's how I went with Gary. You know, I interviewed Gary. He gave me permission to record it. And at the time, back in 2002, you know, I was like, well, there's no way to put this up on the internet where anyone can find it, because you know, I'm not Real Media. I'm not Microsoft Network, 127 megabyte MP3 file. Who's going to host that gargantuan thing? So I sat on it for the longest time. Oh, hello, Wheeling Dragon. So yeah, I was a little, I was surprised that in the space of just a few years, YouTube rolled in and it was like, you can upload a video in 360 or 480. That's high definition for 2005. Yeah, just it became very commonplace pretty fast. But no, I can appreciate that. Have you ever, Kyle? Have you ever read the William Gibson cyberpunk novels?
No, I started reading one. And like the first 3 pages were description of interior furnishings. Like, you know, some woman walks into a hotel and there's all this talk about the chandelier in great detail. And she goes to a hotel room and says that like the shower head was old and fully 30 inches wide. And I thought, really? 30 inches? But anyway, and it's all this lavish description. And I thought, like, was this book written by an interior designer or what? And so I set it aside. And
well, I'm not familiar with a Gibson work that starts off that way, but he wrote Neuromancer, which is considered the seminal cyberpunk novel. It kicked off the literary genre, but he wrote Neuromancer. And he wrote the entire thing on an antique clockwork typewriter. Used correcting fluid when he had to edit stuff. He did not, because everybody thought, oh, hey, you're writing about all this cyberpunk stuff. You must have like a high end, IBM PC or an Apple II or something like that. Because you wrote the book back in 83, 84, around then. But he was like, yeah, no, I think he said he didn't finally break down and buy a computer until like 88 and didn't get on the internet till 1990. So yeah, it's interesting how what is the word I'm looking for here? How authors can be kind of the habits of authors, the idiosyncratic. That's it. How idiosyncratic authors can be with things.
Yeah. I remember like some interview with Roald Dahl where he had this little shed out in his garden where he read. And sitting there basically chain smoking cigarettes while he's going over the illustrations that his friend did and writing things out by hand and all the rest. And he just needed peace, couldn't have anyone bothering him. And it's just funny to think of this children's book author chain smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
And then there was George Orwell, who he found himself too disturbed by the pace of modern life. So to finish his last books to do Animal Farm in 1984, he went off and got himself a cottage on Orkney, in the Orkney Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife had died, and his sister went along with him. And he had a labourer on the land. The land, it was a little bit of farmland as well. And he had a labourer on the land, some guy who lost his foot in Italy, fighting in Italy or something, and so was disabled labourer and got work there. And he's after Orwell died, his sister and that labourer married and adopted his child, who was already adopted. I don't know if it's a war orphan or something. I don't know, but yeah, it was already adopted. He said he needed to be on Orkney Island for peace and quiet. In London in 1945, it was just too busy for him because he was constantly getting rung up and asked to write articles and things like that. Just the pace of modern life. Too many people bothering me. It's too noisy.
Yeah.
This was just like with rotary dial telephones and telegrams and things like that.
Well, poor J.R.R. Tolkien, when The Lord of the Rings hit in the 60s in the United States, he had to deal with hippies in America calling him at it's like 4 a.m. and you had college age hippies in America ringing him up, like navigating the primitive transatlantic telephone system. Well, I say primitive, mid late 60s, but to pester him. And in England, English hippies, like people would walk into his house. Like people would just be, wow, this is where J.R.R. Tolkien worked. I still do. So
I'm sure you would have had to hire a secretary just to deal with all the fan mail and stuff too.
Yeah. So authors, they can be driven to idiosyncrasies, I think, and I know some of them will gladly meet you in a burger joint and then pin you down for 5 hours and tell you about their insane role-playing game. And others will do insane crap like start YouTube channels and stream 5 times a week. But
others will spend the day with you in Seattle and have a salmon lunch with you while telling you about the money in the walls that they had when their house burned down when they came running out in their undies.
It's funny, Kyle. I gotta be 100% honest with you. I have met all of the original creators of Dungeons and Dragons, both the written word and art, with just a couple, 2 or 3 exceptions. I'm talking OD&D. I'm talking putting stuff in wood grain, shelf paper covered boxes. The original authors. And I have met a bunch of people from the history of the game all the way through. I cannot touch that absolutely gonzo meeting you for sheer lunacy. You have the better story, sir. I doff my wizard's hat to you. That Raven McCracken meeting.
This is just what comes of lengthy drug use, I think.
Yeah, that guy deleted on some neurons. Let me tell you what. And what's so weird is if you got it like you have
talking about for any viewers who don't know, we're talking about Raven C.S. McCracken, author of the wonderfully insane World of Cinnabar. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say. So I gotta find this because I gotta share this with you guys. If you have never seen, let's see. I want to try and find. Come on. All right. So.
Yes, Lord Corion, the Raven McCracken. So I was the story is so it was 2012, and I was on my way to a starting strength seminar in Seattle. So starting strength is a method of barbell training, which you can see why I'd be interested in. And I was on my way to a seminar there. They're only held in the United States because the guy in charge of it all, Ripito, he's Texan, and he feels uncomfortable enough visiting a place like Oregon, let alone, He's not going to go to Europe or Australia or something.
Which, if I could just quickly interject, Ripto, absolutely, that is like a post-apocalypse RPG. I would pick that as my character's name. All right, you're playing the warlord. What's your character's name? Ripto. Please continue.
Anyway, so there's a seminar there, Barbell training seminar. So I was going to Seattle, and when I reluctantly travel internationally, what I try to do is allow a couple of days either side to adjust to the time and everything and explore that city. You know, if I'm there anyway, I may as well have a look around. So I had a couple of days either side there in Seattle, and I mentioned this to Bill, and he said, what you should do is, I know who will be there. You should seek this guy out. So it was Raven C.S. McCracken. And
yes.
So I somehow found him on the internet and contacted him and said, I'd like to meet up and talk about Cinnabar. And he said, yes.
Yeah. Now, hey, I got to insert myself into the story because I'm a raging egomaniac. I reached out to Raven for you. I said, hey, Kyle, I reached out to Raven. He wants to meet. So.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember how we contacted him. But yeah.
By the way, this is who I thought he'd be meeting. Keep that picture in mind, everyone. That is who I thought Kyle would be meeting. Continue, Kyle.
Yeah, so label him in my album. Just looking for early pictures of me. I'm just looking at Google Photos to see if I can find the picture. What he was like.
This is who Kyle met.
Oh, you got it, did you?
Yeah, I found one.
Yeah, here we go.
So the Raven that you see a picture of in the world of Cinnabar 1.0 is fairly different from how he looks these days. Well, these days, we're talking about 12 years ago now.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some changes since.
Yeah. Maybe he's got the mohawk going the other way.
I don't know.
Roman bristle brush helmet.
Yeah, I mean, he looks a bit Hitler Youth there. Which that guy in Altered, no, not the guy in Altered Carbon, the detective in The Expanse. He looks a bit like that there. But yeah, but he was like full on mohawk and that when I got there. So that's a Starbucks in Seattle. Wearing his jacket and that. And the what did it say? Me and Raven about to playtest Cinnabar 2. My fighter Gonzo was trying to hack to death his fighter Mort. We didn't finish the combat as we got distracted about talking about game designer politics. Yeah, I deliberately distracted him because he there was like your characters had 200 life points or something, and each attack could not do more than 10 or 20 points, and the combat rounds were taking a couple of minutes to resolve each. And I thought, I don't want to spend my entire day on this one combat. So I just started talking about other stuff in the hopes of drawing him out, and which was very effective. And so we stopped that. So I've still got my signed copy of Cinnabar. It sits in my son's room. Pass it down to my son. And yeah, he greeted me when I walked in and shook his hand and said hello. Yeah, because I described myself as, said, 40s, as I was clean shaven, short hair, short dark hair, blah blah blah. And he said, I'm 50 with a mohawk. And and I walked in and there was one 50-year-old guy with a mohawk. So that's what it was. Yeah, and when we shook hands, he said, do you know that the Earth is 4 trillion tons? Not trillion, trillion, he said. And thought, that's a bit odd way to introduce yourself. But and I said, no, I wasn't aware of that. And he said, I learned it as part of my research for my book. for my new game, Cinnabar 2. And then we sat down and ordered a coffee. And he pulled out the manuscript, which you might be able to see in the picture, and he slammed it down on the table and said, "This is the simplest game ever." Yeah, so, but I don't remember much of it except that slow combat thing and him talking about the play testing with his gamer friends and how, so he had surprise rules, of course, and there was an adjustment for surprise if your character was caught napping, literally asleep. And he said he did contemplate having an element in there to calculate whether your character was in deep sleep or REM sleep or light sleep, because it would be, it's harder to awaken you from deep sleep and all the rest. So there was going to be REM sleep modifiers to surprise. And he said then one of his gamer friends who loves crunchy games like GURPS and stuff said, Raven, that's going too far. So he's like, oh, okay then. But yeah, Raven was completely insane. However, what I will say is that, when you were like 12 or 14 years old, well, Bill certainly knows this, but most of us have experienced it. You're 12 or 14 years old and you're rolling up or writing up your dungeon, doing these endless dungeon maps, shit that's never going to be played, but you're really enthusiastic about it, doing all your campaign notes, and you've just got that adolescent enthusiasm, that completely unself-conscious adolescent geeky enthusiasm. Raven never lost that. The rest of us grew up and became a bit self-conscious or became a bit cynical and jaded about things. And might have rediscovered it a bit later on when we, passed 35 or something and said, to hell with it, I'm going to be who I want to be. But Raven, he never lost that adolescent, unself-conscious, geeky enthusiasm. And I say that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's terrible for his finances and his personal life and stuff, but, it was great.
Hey, Lord Corion, thanks for the super. A tip towards Kyle's continuing RPG therapy fund. Well, you mean therapy for Kyle having met Raven, or Kyle administering therapy to Raven? I'm not sure which way that's going, so I'm just going to let that.
He didn't need therapy. He was a very happy dude.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm going to say this. He friended me on Facebook after this. And, okay, look, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of what he said or what it was on, but, and I'm a believer in free speech. Absolutely. He said some pretty Fed posty things. I'm like, I don't think this is a glow up. I don't think that Raven is like deep in for the man or anything, but at the same time, I think I'm just gonna back away. Thank you, Raven. Yeah, let's call it a you take care of yourself, bud. And, yeah, I had to quickly undock from that from that particular space station. But yeah,
I remember coming home and telling my wife about that, and she said, "It sounds like someone you wouldn't regularly game with." I said, "Oh, hell no,
no."
But like if you met him at a convention, you'd go and play one of his games just to have the stories.
Good Lord, yes. If I ended up ever going to GaryCon again and Raven's there for some reason, which I don't think he would be, hey, hell yes, man. I would go full Tanya Harding. I would injure someone's knee in Minecraft so they couldn't come to the table, so I could get there. See, oh, Raven, that guy, he's dragging his leg, man. I'll sit down and game.
Well, guys are mentioning that he looks like he should be, in a metal band or something like that. Well, he told me he did have a band. I don't know what kind of music they had. It doesn't strike me as a classical type, but yeah, he was in some kind of band. As I said, I don't know what kind of music they had or how good they were, and he ran a nightclub, whether he owned it or managed it. I can't remember, or in any way, who knows what was even true. But yeah, supposedly was involved with a nightclub as well. So, but yeah, he was a great guy. In a very small dose. Looks like they got Sky Spock the nerve pinched in Star Trek 4.
Now, to be fair, Raven's not that chubby. And that guy, by the way, was the lead singer of Frontline Assembly, the industrial band, that not Raven, but the guy in the Star Trek movie. So for those of you who are maybe casual industrial fans, there's a bit of trivia. You can break that out at the next time you head down to the club or whatever. But
yeah, so I got to indulge both my hobby and my profession on that trip.
Yes,
professional trainer and my hobby of gaming.
And
honestly, the gaming one was a lot more entertaining. This squats just aren't that interesting.
Yeah,
it's useful, but not that interesting.
Yeah, squat. So I bend down while I'm holding a weight. Okay. Now what am I going to do with the other 27 hours I have in Seattle? Well, you meet.
Yeah, it was a weekend seminar because it was like there was a Friday afternoon thing where Ripto basically asks everyone if they know what a sarcomere is and then calls them an idiot if they don't. It's a muscle cell. And and then Saturday you do squat, overhead press, and deadlift. And then on Sunday you do bench and power clean. And then there's a question and answer session where everyone's supposed to come up with 2 questions and ask them. And basically, I think it's just so that they can fill out the gaps in their seminar. Is it like, is there something? Because if 6 people ask the same question, then maybe it's something they need to put as part of their seminar regularly on that. But there's usually, somebody who asks, how do you go if you're a vegan and that sort of thing, and he abuses them for being vegans. And, yeah,
as he should.
Well, I mean, is there how big is the Texan vegan society? It's can't be that big.
Right on. Hey, Michael Connor, welcome. I do. I want to mention something just in case some of you folks are coming in and you might not have heard about this. Plus, I can needle Kyle about it. If you have not signed up for the Great Underground Online Gaming Convention, what are you waiting for? Please do so. We're having a virtual convention from April 24th to 28th. Come mill around the Discord server. Any cheap yet very pricey food and beer is entirely up to you, but there's no travel expenses and no hotel expenses, and the convention is free unless you want to buy some merch, and that's between you and the Dungeon Minister. So please check us out, sign up, run games, meet other gamers. Kyle, are you going to be able to make it, my friend?
I don't know. It depends on the hours and all that. Weekends generally aren't that great for me.
I understand. Well, and that is why we start on Wednesday. My Wednesday, which would be your Thursday. So
well, that might be different then. But people are asking about gaming today, obviously. It's not happening. So we concluded the conflict campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I said, what would you guys like to play next? So I said, there's more conflict. And then there's post-apocalyptic, realistic theme post-apocalyptic. There's more Traveller. And there's hex-crawling D&D as options. I got people to vote, and basically nobody wanted more conflict or more any post-apocalyptic. They asked for either Traveller or hex crawling, and the votes were tied for those 2. So the game will only be open to paid members of Bill's channel or his Patreon or whatever. You can do that for as little as $2 a month. If you don't think it's worth tossing Bill $2 a month, I'm not going to GM you. You can go to hell. Sorry, I know Bill's more warm and welcoming, but I was better than Bill, so I try not to be as inclusive as him. So a couple of bucks a month, as subscribers or Patreons or whatever, buying a coffee, whatever the hell. I don't know what his systems are. I don't see them. I assume he's keeping the books, honestly. I don't see them. That's between him and the IRS. Yeah, so it's either Traveller or hex crawling one. I don't have a specific trailer for Traveller. I've just got my old one. I can show you guys, but I do have a specific trailer for the hex crawl. The difference is the Traveller one has still got some credit from the previous players, and but the hex crawl one doesn't.
So if you're going to put that up, that's awesome. But I want to answer a quick question. As Michael Connor asked, have I read Slaying the Dragon? I have a stack about this tall of books, and like this many of them are TSR history books, D&D history books, yet to read. That is on the pile, Michael. I have not I have not gotten to that one yet. And I did want to mention real quick, because Kyle, you were talking about that. Michael Dale mentioned his copy of Conflict showed up today. Well, here, I'm just going to put it up. My copy of Conflict showed up today. I'm thinking about disassembling it and writing it as a letter to get it smuggled into my kids' hands at Air Force basic training. I have no input on that either way, because see previous comments about Fed posting. But you do you.
Does it have to be smuggled in? Is it like are they not allowed books? Or are they like prisoners and not allowed role-playing games, or what?
I don't know, but I am going to tell you kind of an ancillary thing. When my father went to basic training in 1959, I think, for the U.S. Air Force, when he went into basic, there was a very nice lady that lived across the street from him. She was elderly, so he'd known her his whole life, and he went to say goodbye to her, that he was going to basic, and he said at her age, I didn't know if after 9 weeks and then a year's deployment, if when I got home she'd still be with us. And she said, "Oh, Walter, I think it's so wonderful you're going to serve. I brought you something to read on the bus to Texas." And she gave him a bunch of books. Now, some of you in the audience might know this, Kyle, I don't know if you will, but she gave him like books and pamphlets for the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society, up until like, I think the 80s, was a very, very, very hard right-wing conservative group in the United States. And yeah, that would pretty much lose, like if you showed up on a military post with that stuff in your kit, they would just turn you right around at the gate and send you out, and you'd have a big old FBI folder for yourself. So I was like, my God, I can't take this. But he took it from her, and then when he got to the Greyhound station in Gadsden, he just kind of put that all in the circular file.
When I was a subscriber to Soldier of Fortune magazine and International Socialist. I thought if I had, because my view is always like whatever news you read, it's going to be biased. So I thought if I have the extreme right-wing bias and the extreme left-wing bias, I'll be able to find the truth somewhere in the middle. And I actually got called into the Officer Commanding's office one day to explain my subscription to International Socialist. They didn't have a problem with Soldier of Fortune.
That's funny.
Even though this was the early 90s, you still got like advertisements to go and be a mercenary in Sierra Leone or something like that.
Damn. So Michael Connor wants to know, have I asked your opinion of Sword of Cepheus, the fantasy game that uses OG travel?
I know of it, but I haven't read it or played it. But okay. There've been a number of attempts to modify the classic Traveller basic rules for fantasy role playing over the years, and it seems to work fine. Did I do 24.2? I think Jeremy's referring to CrossFit. So CrossFit have got these regular workouts that they put out, and then people, do X, Y, and Z, and then tell us all what time you did X, Y, and Z in and what loads you did it. And no, we don't do CrossFit here. We do proper weightlifting.
When I asked Kyle if I should start running again for fitness, his response was, is something going to be chasing you, Bill? And I was like, no. He's like, don't run.
Go for a walk. Eat 3 cups of veggies a day and go for a walk every day. That's what you need for health. And then a couple times a week, do some sort of lifting, whether it be barbell stuff or some push-ups or whatever. For basic health, you don't need terribly much. We have this stuff to either help you achieve the basic health more quickly, or if you're coming from a big deficit because you're really overweight, or you've got arthritis or other health problems or whatever, you're coming from a big deficit or previous injuries or something like that, or if you have ambitions to do more than simple health, to be reasonably strong or lean or whatever, but you don't have to go hardcore when it's just for health. Eat 3 cups of veggies a day, go for a walk every day, lift a couple of times a week, call a friend every day, and then you should be healthy. Okay, now more important things. Gaming.
Right.
All right. So as I said, I don't have a specific Traveller trailer. This is one of the intros from one of the episodes of the previous Traveller game that we played.
Love your intros, man. This is I've got a license that our sound guy Bo Ganora gave me for editing software and stuff like that. You guys see, like, the best I can do is like blur fades in and outs on some of my interstitials. Kyle actually puts this shit together with free tools, so it is lovely. Speaking of lovely, hello, Miss Bella Games. Welcome.
All right, so that's the Traveller one. And now is the Hex Crawl one. I've forgotten I actually wanted to do a voiceover in the first one, reading out between the time when.
Well, I have the 11 Labs subscription. If you want me to get that in Mako's voice, I can do it if you'd like.
Okay. That'd be great. Yeah, anyway, so there's that. So I don't know, maybe you can do polls on your community page, can't you, Bill?
Yes, I can do polls on the community page. Lord Corion says, well, Hexcrawl has my vote now. Lord Corion, it does not have to be, but he is double subscribed, so that carries some weight. So as far as I'm concerned, there's a vote for Hexcrawl. I mean,
the strongest vote, in my view, comes from anyone who actually wants to play, because they're the ones who really matter.
Well, Lord Corion, do you want to play on Wednesday night? I mean, Lord knows you've paid your dues, my friend.
Yeah, and you keep showing up to watch anyway, so
yeah. Now
all you need is a microphone. You don't actually need a camera if you don't want to put yourself on display. That's fine.
That's right. Corion was one of our original, when I first started streaming Dungeons and Dragons in the afternoons, Corion was one of our original players, and life took him a different direction, but I hope you can return. You think, oh, there we go, ladies and gentlemen, this is where I'd be ringing the brass bell. I think Wednesdays it shall be so. It's going to be great. That is awesome. So there we go, folks. I think we have it. A D&D hex crawl. Now, Kyle,
yes.
Maybe you can take a minute and explain the hex crawl concept for some of our viewers who aren't entirely clear on it, but also let me ask, as both host and player, will there be the occasional trip into the forbidding underground zones? The donjon, if I may.
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't there be?
Excellent.
Yeah, so the concept of the hex crawl, there's a little bit in the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide where it says, if you need to spontaneously create a bit of territory because you don't have anything prepared ahead, you can roll it up hex by hex. And it talks about 1 mile hexes. Most people, when they do maps for their role-playing game, go for quite big hexes, but there's actually a lot in a square mile or thereabouts. I mean, the hex, what would that be, 1.8 square miles or something like that. But anyway, if you put down a circle of diameter 1 mile on any area of your city or your neighborhood or your country or whatever, it encompasses quite a bit of territory. And in the wilderness, that's also about the area. If you have some sort of predatory animal, if you have a couple of bears or a pack of wolves or something like that, they will basically live off that mile. It won't be terribly dense with that, but there's always going to be something within the square mile. So, normally when you're traveling through that territory, you roll up wandering monsters. So what I've said with this, I've got a article on my blog about it, link to it in a bit. So what I've said is that the territory always has some sort of monster or creature in it. The wandering monster check is just to see if you encounter it. I mean, just think of it this way. I've got a fire station 500 yards down the road, but if I go for a walk, I don't see a fireman because they're usually lurking in their lair.
What is the treasure type of the Australian fireman, Kyle?
I don't know. I haven't gone into their lair to loot them and see, but...
Well, they're armed with battle axes. That's probably a good decision.
Yeah. They probably have a couple of hit dice as well, too. So, they've got to pass a fitness test, even though they don't have to keep up the fitness, but they have to pass it to get into it in the first place. Anyway... But yeah, so they're there, but we don't see them every day. So I think the same should apply to monsters in D&D worlds, that they are there. So if you spend enough time looking for them, you will find them. Or if you keep passing back and forth across the area, you will eventually bump into them. And as well, if they're predatory animals, they may sometimes wander out of their hex in search for something to eat. So what I do is I generate the hexes randomly. Start with a little village that the PCs are in, and then generate the 6 hexes around them and see what the territory is and see what monsters of what kind live in there, and then the 12 hexes around that, and so on. Now, the concept here is, you get that bit where you're 9th level and you're meant to go and build a stronghold or whatever the equivalent for your character if you're not a fighter. go and build a stronghold and clear the surrounding hexes of monsters and make yourself lord and start drawing in income, and then people come in and start living in this cleared land. Well, why can't that be a gradual process from your being first level? You've been sent to this little village in the middle of nowhere. They're essentially under siege by all the monsters and bandits and so on out in the wilderness. And people are leaving the village because it's so awful there. But there's some local count or something who says, go and keep them safe and clear out that area. And off they go. Off you go, and you do that. You clear it out over time, and you collect treasure, and you come back to town, and you level up, and you build on like that. And of course, over time, monsters will emerge out of their hexes, and cleared hexes will. There'll be some other monster from somewhere else that's looking for a place to live. But yeah, when you roll it up, you come up with some things that you yourself, as game master, would never have put in. We've got a couple of old shows where we generate some random ones, and there was one where there was a bunch of bandits in a castle nearby, and then there was a nomadic settlement as well. Remember that, Bill?
Yes, I do. I do very much. That we had a lot of fun doing those hex creations. Can I share something with the?
Yeah.
Okay, so when Kyle was talking about scales of maps, now when I send my players across Greyhawk on the Monday night games or even on the Tuesday night live stream games, I'm rolling the number of encounters per terrain type per the Dungeon Master's Guide per day of travel across a hex. So on horseback, you can cover a clear hex in Greyhawk in one day. So plains, you roll 6 possible encounters on the plains. I'm sorry, 3 possible encounters on the plains. So I will roll for every day. But what Kyle is talking about when we talk about super granular hex crawls, and I have the perfect example of this, the aforementioned Monday night game, one of my players, Alan Grohe, who's been on the show once before to talk Greyhawk, and I made the hex where G1, Steady of the Hill Giant Chief, actually appears. And I will put this up right there. So this isn't just for convenience sake. So this hex, this is one 5-mile hex. But then if you look closely, and I'll zoom in, there are medium-sized hexes, and those medium-sized hexes are 5/6 of a mile across. And then there are small hexes that are 733 feet across. So a map like this, just discounting, Nosner Steading, and we know that, the Hill Giants live over here and all that jazz. A map like this could have potentially hundreds of residents, monsters, villagers, that sort of thing living in it. If I have the right of it, Kyle.
Yeah, that's the idea. So I've posted a link to the article through Bill's account there. Yes. And basically the idea is, like, my recurring thing is, the dice are always right. I'm not big on prepared modules. I tend to just roll things up and try to make sense of it. And when you do so, all sorts of crazy stories come up as a result of that, and things that you yourself would never put in. As game masters, in terms of putting in challenges and things for that, I think we've got a natural tendency to moderate or mediocre, that we don't want to put in the great dragon in there, or we don't want to put in just a bunch of kobolds or whatever. We want to put in just the right amount of challenge in that, and it can lead to a kind of blandness. I think it's all right if sometimes it's super easy for the players, and sometimes it's insanely difficult. As long as you, as game master, are kind of reasonable about the insanely difficult, you try to make the really easy ones a bit more challenging in play, and the insanely difficult ones, insanely difficult ones, there will usually be some warning, right? If you've got this ancient great red dragon, in order to sustain himself, he has to eat a fair bit. So that means that local cattle are going to be disappearing, and local sheep are going to be disappearing, and shepherds are going to tell tales. Well, this thing came in and swooped. It was just this dark thing, and it blocked out the moon and the stars, and there was a horrible metallic smell, and I went and hid under a tree, and then it scared all the sheep, and then went off. And then if you approach his and there'll be animal dung around, and you approach his lair, and there'll be all these bones scattered around, and you'll smell this metallic smell and all the rest. And if after that, a bunch of first level players carrying spears and wearing leather armor decide to go into that, well, that's up to them. But they've had some warning. Where you're not just going to have it just spring on them from the sky. That's just stupid. At any moment, the dragon could come flying down from the sky and get them. But that would just be stupid and boring. So you try to, you roll it up, and then you try to make sense of it and create some kind of living world out of it. That's my theory anyway. And that's the approach I take.
Thank you very much for the super. Doc Flamingo says he's always felt square grids were better than hexes. Call me. Then you get 8 over 6, and you don't have to land tech to go in a straight line for certain directions. Well, I think there's ample there's ample flexibility in any good RPG system to do that. If I'm being 100% honest, I'm not really sure why. I mean, I know why TSR did it. They did it because Outdoor Survival, which was an Avalon Hill game, used hexes. So they said, okay, we use hexes for out of doors. But I'm not sure why Avalon Hill went to hexagons and didn't just stick with a square grid. So I'm not.
Well, it was my understanding was as a holdover from the original war game. Tabletop war games that they put out. Once they went from miniatures to having maps and little chits moving around, little counters moving around, I think they got into too many arguments about, well, if he goes straight, he can move 1, but if he goes diagonally, he's moving 1.14. Therefore, and then calculating exactly how far it could go. Whereas if they had hexagon movement, then they're moving 1 space every time. So it was, oddly enough, the hexagon thing was kind of concession to realism, as understood by a bunch of neckbeards in 1960. So they got that, and I think it's just continued out of sheer momentum, just plain old inertia has just continued. And so I think there are some arguments for it. And when you're making maps, if you're going to fill in each unit, whether that unit be a triangle, a square, a hexagon, or whatever, if you're going to fill in each unit with a particular terrain, hexagons look closer to natural terrain than do squares or triangles. Because they sort of, when you just glance at it, it kind of looks more circular and so it looks natural. Like in the military, when they're teaching you about camouflage and all the rest, they say like straight lines are man-made. Nature is curves and fractals and so on. So when you just glance at a hex map, it looks more natural than if you see a grid or whatever. That plus a bit of novelty, because people will see grid maps in their everyday life, or would have, when they saw paper maps of terrain and all the rest, there'd be grids. Whereas, nobody got the grids and calculate the coordinates of something by looking at hexagons. In the military, we didn't have hexagons on our maps.
Right. Yeah. It definitely would have been a bit of a, and one thing I can give grids, like if I'm trying to locate something that is canonically on the World of Greyhawk map, okay, so where is the steading? Okay, so if you look at this, if you look back at this real quick, I'll pop this back up real quick. The steading is on the far left. It's this little gray, you guys can't see my mouse. It's this little gray dot here. But this larger hex, which is 5 miles across, that's only 1/6 of an actual Greyhawk hex. Those are 30 miles. I read the coordinates from the World of Greyhawk set, and I said, oh, okay, it's there. And the party adventured there, and I said it's here, and so on and etc. And Alan very politely messaged me and he said, "Oh, okay, you're putting the steading over here." And I was like, "Yeah, it's where it goes." And he was like, "Okay." And he wasn't making fun of me, and he wasn't like dragging me down as like actually or anything like that. Doing XY coordinates on a hex map is a colossal pain in the ass because the hexes across zigzag, or if you turn it the other way, they zigzag up and down. With a grid map, you can just say, FF83 and you're there. So,
yeah, but they don't necessarily have to be perfect coordinates because, have you looked at a medieval map?
Exactly. I mean, the original maps of Florida that like, I don't know, board cartographers literally just thought Lake Okeechobee, which if you, for Kyle or anyone who doesn't know, Florida, Lake Okeechobee is that big freshwater lake in the kind of southern third of the state. It's the big blue dot in the middle. Early map makers just had that as a bay that was open to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
With a bunch of islands around it.
I remember, see, it wouldn't apply now because everybody's got GPS and stuff, but I remember reading a thing ages ago of they'd got truck drivers to draw their routes between A and B that they were regularly taking, and then compared them to a real map. And it looked a little bit different because if this bit had a lot of traffic, they perceived it as being a longer stretch of road than this bit which had no traffic. And so they drew it out as longer than it actually was. And if this bit had a gradual turn versus a sharp turn and so on. So they didn't have they knew the way from A to B, but they didn't really necessarily have a good idea of the distances and the north to south or whatever. They just had an idea. Going from A to B takes me this many hours if I start at this time and leave at this time. It takes me that many hours if I start and leave at this different time. But yeah, they didn't have a great idea of north and south. I mean, they knew this was north and that's south, but they couldn't say, is this north or is that slightly a little bit off north and all the rest. So I think when you're dealing with characters who are going to be, wandering around on foot for the most part or on horses, I don't think you need perfect grid squares. I spy a direction in the artillery, killing a hex just doesn't have the same gravitas as laying waste a grid square.
Yeah, I mean, they call MLRS the grid square removal device, and yeah, the grid hex removal device just doesn't swing the same. By the way, Lord Corian, I need to ask you this: are you on the Discord, bud? Because that's where we're going to meet up. Let me know. My email deets are scrolling back across, so if you need that info, I can get that to you. But anyway, to go back to what we were saying, and just to answer Doc Flamingo, it's always where's my fire support, but it's never how's my fire support.
All right, so some questions, and so it's a general thing. I will generate everything randomly and then try to tack it together into something sensible. You will not see me generate it randomly because I'm going to generate enough stuff. I remain a chapter ahead of the students in the textbook. I remain at least a hex ahead of the players in that. I mean, like in Classic Traveller, I believe that the original reason for the ship taking a week in jump between star systems was that if the player said, okay, we're going to jump to go to this new star system, that the DM could then say, oh, I don't have the next star system. All right, we will play next week. Your ship will be in jump for a week. We'll play next week, and I'll come back with that new world. And they could roll it all up. So, yeah, that's not really a problem when we're just playing for a short time. Like the old days when you play on a weekend for 8 hours straight, and that's a bit different. You had to have a lot prepared. But when you're only playing for a couple of hours a week or whatever, you don't have to have terribly much prepared. So it's pretty easy to remain a chapter or two ahead of the students in the textbook and just roll things up. So I roll everything up randomly and then try to tack it together into something that makes sense. And as for character generation, we'll do that during the show. It is 3d6 down the line. If your character if the roles you get do not qualify you for the class that you want to play, you can still play it, but you have a 10% experience bonus penalty. Right? So if you just like if you have more than the stats that you need, you get a XP bonus. If you have less than the stats you need, you get a malus. If you want to play a strength 7 fighter, you can, but you get 10% less experience. That guy's going to struggle from his strength and from his experience. That's entirely up to you, though. Vaughn random generation leads to weird terrain, but it also leads to interesting terrain. And weird is interesting.
Mountains in one hex and desert in another. Man, mountains have never been in desert. Kyle, how are we going to cope with that weird? No, I tease Vaughn, but I get what you're saying. But we've done it before here on the show, and there is a flow to it. I mean, if you look at like some real world maps, and this was an awesome thing. I love the Bear Grylls, a survival thing that he would do where he'd go out, and he did one once, and it actually blew my mind because everybody thinks it's the Sahara Desert. It's right there. It's what it says on the tin. It's a desert that goes from the west coast of Africa all the way over to the Iberian Peninsula, right? But when you get up into the Atlas Mountains, they're like up in the upper parts of the mountains, there's foresty areas up there. And you can have the desert. You can be dying of thirst down in the desert, and you hear a rumble up somewhere in the mountains that are a few miles away, and you see some clouds, and then they go away, and then you continue dying of thirst. Well, he did a thing where he hiked across the desert, climbed up into the mountains, was in like a wooded grotto, and it started to rain, and he was like, you don't want to be where I am right now. We're going to move out of the way. In a few minutes, there's going to be a flash flood coming through. It'll never get down to the desert. If you hear rain coming, you'll never you don't wait down there for water. You can climb up here. And yeah, so basically you had desert, mountains, marshy terrain, and a temporary river all in the same hex. So it can happen. It can definitely happen.
Yep. Can definitely happen. So what are we going to start playing? Oh, some guys are late. You need to scroll back to the start and listen to our blather. But yeah, so we got Lord Corian, Bill. Anyone else putting their hands up for a crawl of hexes?
I think
Robert Phillips looks keen, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know we had some folks in the Discord who are all about a crawl of hexes. So,
Gumby wants to play too.
Gumby subscribed. Gumby subscribed. So
I put Gumby in.
And you don't have to give us exact grid coordinates.
Can you have a forward observer for your magic user? So you can fire around the corner or something.
Final defense.
The thief's there and like put the fireball around the corner.
Of course, there is a great scene. Hey, Iron Empire, love you. Thank you for hanging out. Yeah, there's a great scene in Stripe. You've seen Stripes, right, Kyle? Bill Murray. Yeah. When I can't remember the actor now. He played Dan on Night Court, but he walks over to a bunch of soldiers who are trying to get their mortar set up, and he said, let's see how you fire that weapon. I was like, coordinates, sir. What do you mean? But what coordinates? We need grid coordinates, sir. And he grabs a mortar round and hands it to the soldier and says, gentlemen, the best way to learn something is by doing. Now fire that weapon. Now, Kyle knows, and even I as a civilian know, that is like the range safety officer who would be, or the range safety master sergeant who would be like 4 ranks below this guy would walk over and slap that helmet off his head and tell him to get the hell off the range. You don't just start firing a weapon, but they drop the round and it fires, these are 60 millimeter mortars. So you got like 5,000-6,000 yards of range, and it fires straight into the training position where Warren Oates is training Bill Murray's platoon. Very, very funny scene. But I thank you, Clemente Clyde, John Larroquette. But yeah, the best scene in Stripes actually is when Warren Oates' character, Sergeant Hulka, beats up Bill Murray, because it is not played for laughs. There is not a single funny bit in it. And like my dad, I when I watched the movie the first time with my dad, he said, "Yep, that's how it is." Because Bill Murray has smarts off the entire movie, and Sergeant Hulka takes him into the latrine and just says, "You want to take a swing at me?" And so, "Oh, I'd love to take a big swing at you, but I don't want to wind up in the stockade." So he takes his Smokey the Bear hat off, sits it down, and says, "Well, let's have it." And of course, Bill Murray, just like with one hand in his pocket, tries this barroom roundhouse swing, and Warren Oates just comes under him and puts his fist right in Bill Murray's solar plexus. Which do you ever? We don't judge, Kyle. Do you ever get brushed back like that in the military?
No. It's
Kept your mouth shut and did what you needed.
No, I got put on a charge for insubordination because I'd mouthed off. But nobody beat me up. I just got sent to you get confined to barracks. I mean, you're not literally in your barracks all the time. It means you can't go off base and stuff. Wearing your webbing and all your gear and then doing some demeaning task. In my case, it was cutting the grass in front of the commanding officer's office with a pair of scissors. So there was another guy I heard tell, I didn't see it, I didn't know the guy, but I heard tell that he had to dig a 6-foot trench with a spoon. So, yeah, they don't tend to smack you around because they've got so many other ways to just make your life miserable and humiliate you and stuff.
Yeah, it's
like, in all honesty, like when you're talking about a 19-year-old guy or whatever, if you give him the choice between being bored out of his gourd or being smacked in the head, he'd take being smacked in the head. So it's actually a worse punishment. All day for 3 days, cutting the grass in front of the CO's office, and he had the mirrored glass or the plastic over it or whatever to make it a mirror. So yeah. I never knew if he was looking out the mirror at me, Lieutenant Colonel. So I couldn't just sit back and pick my nose or something. I just had to be snipping away the whole time. Truth, he probably wasn't even in there, but I didn't know. So I had to.
It's weird. We've fallen down a rabbit hole. I promise we'll get back to hex crawls in a second. But I just have to say, with regard to Stripes and the latrine scene and Full Metal Jacket and every scene in the first 90 minutes of the movie, and the boys from Company C and In My Tribe and any movie with a drill instructor, I've known veterans who've watched those films with me, or we've talked about those films, and there seems to be just American servicemen, an exact 50-50 division. Some of them say, that's insane Hollywood BS. We're not allowed to hit guys. We don't get screamed. We didn't scream at guys. We didn't get screamed at. And then I've talked to other veterans who said, it's like that, but it's way more intense. So
there was an interview with Ali Emery where he just said, that instructors like his character Hartman did exist, but he didn't believe that was the right way to train people. He said basically in any organization there's going to be little guys who get off on the power trip and go nasty and that. He said it's going to happen. And yeah, I mean, I certainly knew nasty guys like that, but I didn't see someone getting smacked around or whatever. Not in recruit course. Later on, there were things, and certainly you could get smacked one on the firing range if you mishandled your weapon. But I don't really have a problem with that because, like, you're handling firearms and they're designed to kill people. So if you mishandle them, then they can do so accidentally. I don't think that's really an issue, even though it doesn't always turn out good. But that's a story for another day. Keep in mind what happened to Hartman. Yeah, well, Emery apparently also said that, like, a competent drill instructor would have seen that Pyle was sort of going down the rabbit hole of insanity and acted in some way, pulled him out. And
They had, even back then they had corrective systems, and they could give you a general discharge if they thought you had stripped a couple of those.
I mean, there's always, look, in any organization, it doesn't have to be something particularly hardcore or anything. In any organization, you'll get people who join up and they don't really fit in, and sometimes they can be taught to fit in. Sometimes they're just a bit immature, or they just don't yet have the skills to fit in, but other times they're just absolutely not suited for that, in every field. It's not just like being a Marine or something, but like I'm sure you saw it in IT stuff. People would join up to handle computers all day, and they quickly realized, or others quickly realized, that they just weren't suited to it. They didn't have the right mindset or whatever.
This happened at least a couple of times. Like we constantly had people when I was at Star Systems who wanted to come and work in IT because they literally thought that we just sat around and effed around with computers in cool ways. And this was the go-go 90s, and PCs were a lot of fun, and technology was changing on almost a monthly basis. And I guess they thought that we played with with computers and did games and stuff like that. And people would come in and interview for the occasional opening we would have as our department would grow, or we'd shift people over, whatever, have an opening. And that just kind of became a standard question. What do you think we do over here? And
there's comments here saying the military's softer these days, and that. Look, every old veteran since time immemorial has said it's softer than when I was in, and all the rest. I think that's all bollocks. Emery himself said, he said, like in the 1990s in interviews, he said that, because I watched it the other day, discussing this with a friend, and he said that he thought that the Marine recruits that he saw now in the 1990s were better than the recruits that he saw in the 1960s. He said they're stronger, they're more squared away, and he said it's because they're volunteers rather than conscripts. They want to be there.
Yeah.
And he said that they're not like, so. I don't believe. Like, I mean, look, there's some accommodations, but that's because the culture as a whole changes. So there are certain things that you could regularly say. Homophobic or racist slurs or whatever were regularly tossed around in earlier times, and they're not nowadays. But that makes absolutely zero difference to the combat effectiveness of a soldier. You're not a better soldier because you can say that they're homosexual or something. It has zero correlation whatsoever. Same as in any other job. It doesn't matter. But there are people who just don't fit in, and if you have some kind of competent management, then they'll either be taught so they can fit in, or they'll be found another job.
Yeah. No, I think you're very right, and I also tend, I mean, again, having not been, and I tend to think you're right that the average recruit today is a brighter kid than, say, of 30, 40, 50 years ago. That just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the stats for society in general. That, okay, you get a third grade kid from a poor area and a third grade kid from a rich area, and their performances are different academically, right? And 50 years on, there's still that gap. But the thing is that the third grade kid from the poor area today is better than the third grade kid from a rich area 50 years ago. It's the rising tide has floated all boats. They both come up, and so I think the recruits, that would be the same. They'd be smarter in that, and they have to be, because they're using more technical equipment and stuff. It's not just fixed bayonets and charge.
Yeah, I mean, you needed you needed to know how to read a graduated glass scope and maybe do a little bit of algebra or trig in your head to fire a tank gun in 1950. And now it's like you have a computer that can fail 6 ways to Sunday. It can aim the gun for you. You better know a computer too. So
yeah. I mean,
anyway.
it's the same. It's the same. People talk about gaming in the same way. Oh, we're all tough old grunyards and blah blah blah. That's all bollocks.
Yeah.
That's we were just scrawny geeks too.
So anyway, I'm excited about this hex crawl. Now, are you just going to develop the hex, Kyle? Are you setting it in a campaign world, or how's that going to work?
Well, campaign world is just generic fantasy. I mean, we don't need to make it really fancy. It's going to be the generic fantasy that's ultimately derived from basically, like Dark Ages Britain. I mean, that's the implied fantasy setting for so many things, and for, in some ways, D&D. I mean, D&D being generic rule set, it allows you to do whatever kind of campaign you want, but there's that obvious thing, you're in the village on the marches, and there's the Picts who want to come down and murder you, and you're trying to bring civilization to them, whether they like it or not. But in this case, it's not Picts, and you're not Saxons. They're orcs and kobolds and ogres and bullets and things, and you're humans and elves and halflings and all the rest.
Well, I am looking forward to it. And Daniel Rowan says the only thing I love more than rumor tables is a hex crawl. What about a hex-based rumor table? There might be something in that hex. I don't know. Maybe you guys should go check it out. I could do that. But no, I'm excited about it too. And for those of you who haven't watched Kyle Game Master Fantasy, which is probably a whole bunch of you, because
I don't think I've done it. Yeah.
I think the closest you come is when we populated our hex together. That is the close. Although I have a vague recollection of you running like a one-on-one game with me on the show, but that may have just been a private session between you and I.
Yeah, we did a private session. The one-on-one session we did was when I played and fell in a 10-foot pit and died.
Yes, and right in the entrance to the Keep on the Borderland, or the Caves of Chaos.
After much planning, I was trying to be sneaky and all the rest. Like, I was trying to win the trust of the ogre, so that I could either use him against the other monsters, or at least, because I kept feeding him, so I was going to either like win his trust so I could use him against the other monsters, or if I couldn't win his trust, poison him and kill him so that I could then just go and take his treasure.
Well, I mean,
but I didn't succeed at either. I was halfway through that and I started talking to the kobolds or whatever they were, and gnolls or whatever, and fell in their pit.
It was kobolds, and the reaction rolls were not with you, unfortunately. He had some fighting men. Things were going great, and then he's like, "Well, I can negotiate with you guys, right?" And I rolled the guys. It was like 29, and his charisma was already not great. So they were like, "We're just rolling you, and you're fighting men, mate." So that was the end of that. Sometimes the dice giveth, and sometimes the dice taketh away. What can I say? I tend to be a firm.
These things happen. The randomness of the dice. The players don't complain when the dice go their way, so they don't get to complain when it goes against them.
Exactly. So
nobody rolls straight 18s for their characters and then goes, "Oh, random generation is terrible, man."
It's the guys who don't get a score above 7. They don't complain, but if you give them the same dice and they rolled 18s all the way down, they'd be like, "Well, that's perfectly cromulent. I will take those dice," But so what time are we playing? When is kickoff next week, Kyle?
The usual time for us. So it was 11 a.m. here, so whatever time that is over there. Usual time.
So you started at 11.
We got Corian, Bill, and Gumby. We need one more. 4 play. Always 4 there.
Well, I thought
Because you need fighter, magic user, cleric, and thief. You see, and then everything else is optional.
I thought we had some of the conflict crowd that was looking at jumping in, but I don't know.
We'll ask them in the Discord.
I'll reach out to them on the Discord and I'll see who's up for it. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm gonna enjoy playing. I don't know what I'm gonna play, but we'll help the dice figure that out.
All right, we'll play the trailer once more for anyone who hasn't seen it yet.
Yes.
And just to ramp up the excitement, and then you can do your wrap up.
Roll that trailer for us. Well, all righty then. Thank you very much for showing that to us, Kyle. And I'm looking forward to that. Now, tomorrow night, everybody, of course, we have got, we will have a guest here tomorrow night. Matt Finch will be here. I'm looking forward to that. Kyle, thank you for running some game for us next week. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep, from next week.
You guys tune in because more D&D play equals more goodness. Friday night, we are back with some classic Gamma World. Don't miss that. And then Monday, we'll just start this madness all over again. Anything in closing, Kyle? Any final words before I thrust you back into the darkness?
The dice are always right.
The dice are always right. Darn tootin' they are. But as for me, everyone, I'm going to slide off into the ether. And I want to thank you all, especially thank you very much, Lord Corion and Doc Flamingo, for those supers. It does really help. Everybody, be good to each other. I love you all. Thank you for hanging out tonight. And it doesn't matter what hex you're in. Watch out for those owl bears. Peace, everybody.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle, way off course? Naked as a toad, all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.